Have you ever stood in the oil aisle at the auto parts store, staring at a wall of cans, wondering what on earth the difference is between 5 watts 30 and 10 watts 40? Most people just grab whatever their neighbor told them to use or whatever is on sale. And honestly, that can cause some real damage over time. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what those numbers and letters on the front of an oil can actually mean from start to finish, in plain English. And stick around to the end, because I've got a bonus tip that'll show you a simple trick for remembering the right oil grade for your engine every single time without ever second-guessing yourself. Let's get into it. Oil codes might look like a random jumble of numbers and letters, but once someone breaks it down for you the right way, it honestly makes a lot of sense. And here's the good news. You only need to understand a handful of concepts to never buy the wrong oil again. This is one of those things that, once you get it, you'll wonder why nobody explained it to you sooner. So let's start by talking about what those codes are actually measuring in the first place. When you pick up a can of motor oil and look at the front of it, you're going to see something like 5W30 or 10W40, or maybe even 0 watts 20. What you're looking at is a rating system developed by an organization called the Society of Automotive Engineers. Most folks in the industry just call it by its initials, SAE. That's the same group that sets a lot of the technical standards used across the automotive world, and they're the ones who came up with the way we measure and describe how oil behaves inside an engine. Now, these codes are telling you two things about that particular oil: how it performs when it's cold and how it performs when it's hot. That's really the whole story in a nutshell. The code has two parts, and each part answers one of those two questions. Once you understand what each part is measuring and why it matters, picking the right oil becomes second nature. So let's start with the part that's actually a little easier to understand, and that's the number on the right-hand side of the code. Let's use 5W30 as our example, because it's one of the most common grades you'll come across. The number on the right side, in this case, 30, tells you how this oil performs when your engine is fully warmed up and running at normal operating temperature. That temperature is about 100 degrees centigrade, which works out to roughly 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason oil engineers chose that temperature is because it's considered a typical working temperature for most engines out on the road. So when a lab tests oil, they heat it up to 100 degrees centigrade and then run it through a device called a viscometer. A viscometer, you can think of it like a narrow tube. And the oil flows through it, and the lab times exactly how long it takes to get from one end to the other. If the oil moves through slowly, it gets a higher number. If it moves through quickly, it gets a lower number. That number is what ends up on the right side of your oil code. Now, the word we use for this is viscosity. Viscosity just means thickness. A thick oil has high viscosity and flows slowly. A thin oil has low viscosity and flows quickly. So a 30-rated oil is thinner than a 40-rated oil at that same 100-degree temperature. And here's why that matters in a real engine. Oil that's too thick at operating temperature can't get into all the tight clearances between moving parts fast enough. It creates resistance and makes the engine work harder than it needs to. Oil that's too thin won't form a strong enough film between those metal surfaces, and you start to get wear. The manufacturer of your engine ran their own tests and figured out exactly what viscosity their engine needs at operating temperature to run efficiently and stay protected. That's why they list a specific grade in your owner's manual, and it's worth following their recommendation. I've talked to a lot of folks over the years who thought a thicker oil was automatically better, and that's just not true. The right oil for your engine is the one your manufacturer specifies, not the heaviest one on the shelf. Now let's talk about the left side of the code, because this is where it gets really interesting. That 5 and 5 W30 and the W that goes right along with it. Those tell you how this oil behaves when it's cold. Specifically, when your engine has been sitting overnight or hasn't been run in a while. The W stands for winter. I want you to remember that, because it's the simplest way to keep these two sides of the code straight. The right side is hot. The left side, the W side, is winter. Cold. Whatever memory trick works for you, just hang on to that. Here's the thing about oil and cold temperatures. Most regular oils get thicker when they cool down and thinner when they heat up. That's just how liquids behave in general. Think about honey sitting in a cold cabinet versus honey that's been sitting in a warm kitchen. Same honey, but very different consistency. Engine oil does the same thing, and that creates a real problem when you go to start your car on a cold morning. The moment you turn that key, your engine needs oil to flow immediately. Not after it warms up, not a few seconds later, but right now. The parts that wear the fastest in any engine are the ones that go a certain number of seconds without proper lubrication, right at startup. If your oil is thick and sluggish when it's cold, it can't get to those parts fast enough, and that's when you put the most wear on your engine. Not during highway driving, not during heavy loads, right there at startup on a cold morning. So the W number tells you how thin this oil stays, even when it's cold. A 5W rated oil stays thin, enough to flow and protect your engine even in quite cold conditions. A 0W oil stays even thinner at cold temperatures, which is why you see it recommended in some newer vehicles, especially ones designed to operate in colder climates. A 10W or 15W oil is going to be a bit more sluggish in the cold, which is fine for warmer climates or for engines that don't need that hair trigger protection at startup. The lower that W number, the better the oil flows when it's cold, and the faster it gets to where it needs to be the moment you start the engine. Now here's what makes modern multi-grade oils so clever. In the old days, and I'm talking decades ago, you had to use a different weight oil in the winter than you did in the summer. You'd drain it out seasonally and swap it for something thinner in the cold months. That was a lot of work, and most folks don't miss those days. What engineers figured out was how to blend oil with certain additives that change how it responds to temperature. These additives, called viscosity index improvers, allow the oil to behave like a thin 5-weight oil when it's cold, and then behave like a thicker 30-weight oil once it gets up to operating temperature. Same oil, two very different behaviors depending on the temperature it's in. That's the whole secret behind modern multi-grade oils, and it's genuinely impressive engineering when you think about it. So when you see 5W30 on a can, here's what that's actually telling you. This oil is thin, like an SAE 5-weight oil when your engine is cold. So it flows immediately at startup and gets to your bearings and your cylinder walls right away. Then, once your engine reaches normal operating temperature, around 100 degrees centigrade, it performs like an SAE 30-weight oil, which means it holds its film strength. It maintains the right thickness between your moving parts, and your engine stays protected throughout normal operation. That's a lot of information packed into 5 characters on the front of a can, and once you see it for what it is, you'll never look at those labels the same way again. Now let's talk about how to actually match the right oil to your specific engine. Because this is where a lot of people make the mistake of thinking one grade fits every situation. The honest truth is, different engines are built with different internal tolerances and different operating requirements. And the oil grade that works perfectly in one engine might not be the right choice for another. A high-performance turbocharged engine, for example, has a turbocharger that spins at incredibly high speeds and needs oil to get up there almost instantly after startup. If you're running a thick oil in that engine, you're asking for trouble, because that turbocharger is starving for lubrication in those first few seconds. Some engines are built with tighter clearances between their components, which means they need a thinner oil to flow freely into those spaces. Other engines are built with slightly more relaxed tolerances and do just fine with a heavier grade. Engines with hydraulic valve components, sometimes called hydraulic lifters or hydraulic tappets, are also sensitive to oil thickness because they rely on oil pressure to function properly. Too thick, and not enough oil gets to those components. Too thin, and you lose the pressure they need to operate. The single best thing you can do is open your glove box, pull out your owner's manual, and look up the recommended oil grade for your specific engine. That's it. The manufacturer tested their engine with multiple oil grades, found what works best, and printed it right there for you. If you've lost your manual, and honestly, a lot of us have, a quick search online using your vehicle's year, make, model, and engine size will pull it right up. Some automakers even print the recommended grade right on the oil cap on top of your engine, which is a nice touch. I always tell people, trust the engineer who built your engine over the guy at the counter who says he's always run 40 weight in everything he owns. Your engine is specific, and it deserves specific care. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future videos. All right, let's keep going. Now, there's one more type of oil worth understanding before we get into troubleshooting, and that's single-grade oil. You may have seen cans at the hardware store or garden center that just say something like SAE 30 with no W and no second number. No 5W, no 10W, just 30. That single number tells you this oil has only been tested and rated at 100 degrees centigrade. There's no cold weather rating at all, because this oil was never designed to be used in cold conditions or in engines that need that immediate cold start protection. Single-grade oils are most commonly used in small engines, lawn, mowers, tillers, pressure washers, log splitters, that kind of equipment. These machines typically run outdoors in warmer weather, they have much simpler engines, and they don't have the same critical lubrication demands at startup that a car engine has. If you've ever grabbed a bottle of SAE 30 for your lawnmower in the spring, that's exactly the right call. But you would never want to put that in your car or truck, because the moment that engine sits overnight and gets cold, that oil is going to be thick as molasses and your engine is going to struggle badly right at startup. Different tool, different oil, it's that straightforward. Now let's talk about some common problems people run into with engine oil. Because even with a solid understanding of the grades, there are a few mistakes that come up again and again. The first one is using the wrong grade because of a good deal. I understand Motor oil can add up, and when you see a big jug on clearance, it's tempting. But if that jug is a 10W40 and your engine calls for 0W20, you're setting yourself up for poor cold start lubrication and potentially thicker than ideal oil at operating temperature. Over time, that adds up to real engine wear. The savings on one jug of oil are nothing compared to what a worn engine costs to repair. Stick with what your manufacturer recommends. The second problem is mixing grades. Some folks top off their oil with whatever is sitting in the garage, even if it's a different grade than what's already in the engine. In a pinch, and I mean a real pinch, where you've got no other option, mixing grades isn't going to destroy your engine on the spot, but it dilutes the properties of the oil that's in there, and you really want to do a proper oil change as soon as you can to get back to a single, consistent grade. Don't make it a habit. Third, and this one catches people off guard, ignoring oil grade changes as an engine gets older. Some high-mileage engines develop small clearances between their worn components that benefit from a slightly heavier oil grade. That's why you see high-mileage specific oils on the shelf, and many of them are formulated in grades like 10W40 or even 10W30, with conditioning additives to help compensate for that extra wear. If your engine is past about 75,000 miles, and you're noticing a little more oil consumption or some light ticking at startup, it might be worth having a conversation with a trusted mechanic about whether a high-mileage formula makes sense for your situation. Fourth, using oil that's past its service life. This one doesn't get talked about enough. Oil breaks down over time, and once it does, no grade rating in the world is going to save your engine from the sludge and wear that comes with degraded oil. If your oil looks black and gritty on the dipstick, that oil is done. Get it changed. Fresh oil of the correct grade is always going to protect your engine better than old oil of any grade. Fifth, ignoring climate when choosing your grade. If you live somewhere that gets genuinely cold winters, I'm talking regularly below freezing, and you're running a 10W30 oil, you might want to reconsider. A 5W30 or even a 0W30 keeps flowing much better in those conditions and gives your engine that fast protection at startup when temperatures really drop. If you live in a warm climate year-round and run the same engine, a 10W30 might be perfectly fine. Climate is part of the equation. The good news is, if you follow the steps we've covered, read your owner's manual, match the grade to your climate and engine type, use fresh oil, and change it on schedule, you're going to avoid the vast majority of these problems without even thinking about it. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, and this is one I genuinely love sharing because it makes everything we talked about today stick in a way that's hard to forget. Here's the trick. Next time you're looking at an oil code, cover up the W and everything to the left of it with your thumb. What's left is the hot number. That's how your oil performs once your engine is warmed up and working. Now cover up everything to the right of the W, including the W itself. What's left is the cold number. That's how your oil performs on a cold morning right when you need it most. Hot on the right, cold on the left, with a W for winter to remind you. That's the whole code, broken into two halves, each one answering a different question about a different temperature. Now here's where this gets really practical. Write your vehicle's recommended oil grade on a small piece of masking tape and stick it right inside your glove box. Or better yet, take a photo of it on your phone and put it in an album labeled car stuff. When you're standing in that oil aisle and the shelves are full and there are a dozen grades staring back at you, you don't have to guess. You pull out that note or that photo, you match the code, and you're done in 30 seconds. I've been doing something like this for years, and it takes all the uncertainty out of it. You walk in, knowing exactly what you need, you grab it, and you're on your way. One more thing worth mentioning. If you ever see an oil that carries an API certification donut on the label, that's the American Petroleum Institute telling you this oil has been tested and meets the performance standards for modern engines. Look for the API service category that matches what your owner's manual specifies. For most gasoline engines on the road today, you'll want to see a current API designation on the label. It's one more layer of confirmation that you've got the right product in your hand. So that's everything you need to know about reading engine oil codes. The right side tells you how your oil performs at full operating temperature. The left side, with the W for winter, tells you how it flows when your engine is cold. Multi-grade oils do both jobs in one can, and single-grade oils are made for simple equipment that doesn't need cold weather performance. Match the grade to your manufacturer's recommendation, factor in your climate, and change your oil on a regular schedule with fresh oil every time. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll know when we put out new videos. And if you've got questions about oil grades, or if you've got a tip of your own that's worked well for you, drop it in the comments below. I read every one of them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.